Alrighty, good morning everybody. I know my camera angle is kind of a little different here, but top of my head's cut off, but it's for a reason. So we're going to teach you a little bit about your tension unit on your machine today, but I guess the only thing I wanted to talk about first was what Linda and Carrie just talked about, which was the grand reopening. So yes, come on down, say hello to us, and what, do you want me to hold it again?
Do you want it?
It's not going to fit on my screen. Here's the bottom half. So yeah, come on in. We'll be excited. It'll be a fun time. And yes, lots of good prizes. Linda is pulling together a lot of good prizes, and we're going to have some fun spin the wheel prizes. I think that's getting delivered today, so we can play with that a little bit. It'll be fun, a good little party. But yes, we want everybody there, so come on down. We're excited. It'll just be good just to get the community involved again and have some more fun in there. So, all right. So today for you guys, I am going to teach you guys about your tension system and how it works. And you two kind of remind me of my bullet points here because I didn't write a sticky note down. But I want to talk about kind of why it's important to thread your machine with your foot up. Or we're going to talk about that, why it's important to thread your machine with your foot up. We're going to talk about why it's important to keep your machine clean. And then also we're going to kind of touch why people always say to pull your machine, if you snip your thread up here, right, why it's important to pull your thread through your machine and not backwards through your machine. So I'll try to cover all that here in a way that is easy for y'all, but it'll be good. So in front of me, I have a little bit older FOF, and in a second, I'm going to ask you, Carrie, to zoom in, but in a second, so you just turn that counterclockwise and it will zoom in for us. So this is a little bit older FOF here. It's a little bit more basic one, but I've got all the covers off here, and I chose this machine because it's going to be very easy for me to show you what we're talking about right here on our tension unit. So let's go ahead and zoom in here, and we'll talk about why stuff is important. So just all the way. Okay, perfect. So right here is what we call our tension unit, okay? When we thread our machine, we've got our cover on right here, and our thread is normally, sitting right here on a spool pin, something like that. And then we're going to thread our machine coming from over here to normally a thread guide right here or something, and then we come down. Right? Now, on sewing machines, the thread path is always going to be the same order, okay? And this is where when people come in like, oh, I bought a machine and I have no idea how to thread it. Yeah, you do. It threads the exact same order as your other machines. It's just they look a little bit different, right? So like we already covered the first part. So you're always going to go from your spool stand to some kind of thread guide, right? On Baby Lock, it kind of comes under a tooth and comes up and around. FOF on this one, it comes from our spool pin to a little hook that's sitting right here that comes around and down. But it always goes that same way. Then immediately after that, you always go through your tension, okay? Now these, and this is where it's going to be getting a little fun, these little pancakes right here are our tension unit, right? So you see how they're kind of loose and wiggly right now, but this is our tension unit. So what happens is when our tension is set, those pancakes clamp on each other, right? So by doing so, it holds your thread and makes it harder to pull through that thread, right? Now, some people, this is actually kind of a bonus thing, this little plate in the middle of it, so it's kind of hard to see, but you have the one pancake that you can see really well over here, and then we have another pancake on the other side. But on a lot of people's machines, we have a plate in the middle of it, and a lot of people are like, what's that plate for? Do I go on the right side or the left side of the plate? I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. You can go on the right or the left side. It doesn't matter. But when you are doing twin needle and you have two threads going, you want one on one side and one on the other side. And that will make a little bit more sense when I talk about why we want to keep this clean as well too. So remind me to touch back on that one. So then we go through our tension unit, and then we always come to our check spring. So on this machine, you're probably not going to be able to see it until I take this off. But there's a check spring that's down here, and I'll explain what that does. And then it does that U-turn there and comes up to our thread take-up, and then we go down to our needle. Every machine threads in that same order, right? So when you get a brand spanking new machine and you're like, I don't know what's going on, remember that video, watch this video again, and it will help you figure out how to thread that. The very first thing I want to show you guys is why we thread our sewing machines with our presser foot up, okay? So if we raise and lower my presser foot, and this might actually be best to see from the back, on this particular, man, we need an even more zoomy camera. On this particular machine, if you can see, no, that's good right there. If you can see looking right here, there's a little arm as I raise this up and down that is coming up and down as I raise and lower my presser foot. Now, what that is doing is it is actually hitting a little lever on my tension unit, and it is causing these pancakes to spread open, okay? That is why we thread our sewing machines with the presser foot up, because with these pancakes spread open, my thread can lay inside of those pancakes. So then when I drop it, my pancakes shut directly onto that thread and it holds it tight, right? Vice versa, if you thread your machine with the presser foot up, now your thread is going to be laying kind of just on top of your pancakes. Might kind of get seated in there a little bit, but it's not going to be fully seated in my pancakes here, right? Because they're shut and has that spring pressed against it to not be able to seat down in there. So that is the reason why we thread our sewing machines with the presser foot up. So when you start sewing and you get that bird's nest on the back, there's a couple reasons, but one of the reasons could be because you threaded your machine with your presser foot down, so that way it's not set inside of your tension unit, your pancakes there, your tension unit, right? So that's the most important thing as to why we want to thread our sewing machine with the presser foot up, okay? Now I'm going to take this thread tension unit off, okay? And then we'll explain a little bit about the check spring and what its job is and why we have one of those. So now we have just our tension unit right here, okay? So if you remember, we threaded down along this side and we came down our tension unit, and now we're coming down, and then it makes our U-turn across here. Let me do it with just my finger. So it comes down here, comes across, and makes our U-turn up here. And then our thread take-up is sticking through this slot right here that we loop around our thread take-up, and then we go down to our needle, okay? So we can now kind of see that lever right here. Can you pull this a little closer, because it's just not focusing on what I'm doing. There we go. So when I raised and lowered my presser foot, what I was actually hitting is this lever right here. Now you can see that spring that it's pressing against is actually opening and closing those pancakes. So that's releasing and giving my tension as well too. And then this is a manual tension. So as I spin my tension unit here to raise and lower my tension, you can actually see that spring being compressed and decompressed. So all that is doing is when I drop my presser foot and those pancakes close, and then I adjust my tension here, it is actually going to press more against those pancakes or press less against those pancakes. And by in turn of doing that, it's going to be harder for that thread to pull through my pancakes here, or it's going to be easier. right? So that's how your manual tension works. If you have electronic tension, you've got the same parts here. It's just instead of this knob, we have a little motor that just spins and compresses and decompresses the spring. So it's the same setup, it's just automatic, electronic, instead of a manual, okay? Then we get into our check spring. So our check spring is this little silver guy right at the tip of my screwdriver, okay? Now what its job is when you come around, and it's kind of hard to see this because it's so small, but when you come down, there we go, now you guys can see it. So you see how it moves up and down right there? That is your check spring, okay? So as you thread your sewing machine, it comes down here and makes that U-turn down at the bottom, it actually goes into that check spring. So what happens is as your needle is taking its stroke, your thread take-up is also going up and down. I think you guys see that in your machine. It's going down at 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? So what's happening is as that thread take-up is going down, this check spring is helping to take slack out of your thread so your whole thread system, whole thread path stays a little taut. So that way it doesn't get loose and just turn into a giant knot tying around something in your machine, right? So that check spring is very, 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 very important. Now, going back to bird's nesting on the back, that is usually the other reason. There's normally 3 reasons. First reason we talked about is it's not in your tension unit itself, right? Not in your tension springs. And then second reason, because you possibly missed that check spring there, right? And then last reason we'll get to in a second, right? So this check spring, like we talked about, is just very important to help take slack out of your thread and keep things taut. Now, also on some machines, this check spring has another very, 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 very important role, and that is your thread break sensor. Okay, so remember how I talked about how this spring, sorry, I keep moving this out of frame. This spring does its spring action every single time your needle takes a stroke, right? So what the engineers have done is they put a sensor on this check spring. And as soon as they see that that check spring stops moving, it knows that you have a thread break, because that has to move every single needle penetration, right? So if it stops moving, that means you got something going on, and now your machine pops up with a thread break error. Now, if you don't have a thread break sensor on your machine, then obviously it's going to look just like this one, where it's just a spring, right? Now, the next most important thing that we talked about, that I needed to talk about, was why you thread your machine. When you snip your thread from the top, why you need to pull it through your machine. And that is because this check spring. So what will happen is you can see that this check spring is on one side of my tension unit, and it's not on the other side here. You can see it, but it's not on that side. So if you start pulling your thread through the top of your machine backwards as to what your thread's doing, you're causing a lot of stress on that check spring, and it can dislodge it and put it in the wrong spot. And then it's going to cause you a lot of issues, because now it's not going to be able to do its spring action, keeping tension on that thread. And if you have a thread break sensor, it's not going to be able to see that because it's not moving, right? So really important to pull your thread through your machine, okay? And then let me back up real quick. The other thing I forgot to talk about was your tension units and why it's important to keep this clean, okay? All too often we've had machines come in, sometimes even 2 days after we've had a service, and it looks like the tensions are just completely out of whack. And we'll take this apart and we'll take a look inside of these pancakes, and we'll find a glob of crap, right? Whether it be some fuzzies or a little tiny ball of thread, something like that, right? Now you got to think about what's happening in there. So as we thread our machine, I have one strand of thread going between my hands here, my pancakes, right? So if I get a fuzz ball or a little tiny ball of lint or a little tiny ball of thread or something like that, or even just a thicker thread than what you're using now, what's happening is it's opening up that tension unit a little bit, right? So now when I lay my thread in here, it's going to fit in between my hands, but then it's not going to be tight enough because that other piece of junk in there is holding that open. So in turn, it basically makes your tensions useless, right? Because it's held open. So that's why it's so important to make sure you're cleaning your machine. And sometimes you just have crap built up inside of here, and that's when you just raise your presser foot, get one of those brushes that has those long bristles on it, and just clean in here a little bit. You'll be surprised at the crap that sometimes we pull out of here, and you're just like, oh, well, there's your problem, Susie. That's the issue. So makes it super easy to keep that clean. So then, yes, next thing up was that check spring. Make sure you're always pulling it through your machine, because that way it doesn't put abnormal stress on that check spring. It's going the same thread path, and it's not going to dislodge that check spring, right? Then the third thing that we talked about, getting a nasty ball on your machine, on the back of your thread, is because, or your back of your fabric, is because you missed your take up. So those are generally the three reasons as to why we get a nasty bird's nest on the back. One, you missed your thread, your tension pancakes. Two, you missed your check spring. Or number three, you just missed your thread take up somehow. Any one of those three things is going to result in just a ball or a thread's nest on the back of your machine. And that's why if you bring your machine into us, or before you do, we always tell you, thread your machine 3, 4, 5 times, because 98% of the time, that's going to solve what the problem is. And then sometimes, yeah, you just have junk built up in there, or maybe this is a little bit stuck and it's not closing all the way. So it's very, very, very important to make sure that you have this all clean. So let's go back out here and we'll just kind of recap everything, and then just scoot back a little bit because we moved in. All right, so there you have it. That's kind of your basics of how your thread tension unit works. Remember, and actually you can probably see it a little bit more here. When you raise your presser foot, it's basically opening up your tension unit. So just make sure you're always threading your machine with your tension unit up, or your presser foot up, because it's always going to help you out. Make sure your machine is clean. And obviously you see, people when they come in with this machine, all the covers off, people come in like, well, I oil my machine. Okay, did you get all of this stuff that's completely covered by your covers that you can't get to? So make sure you bring in your machine for us to service, and we'll be happy to help you out. But other than that, I think that kind of covers everything. Does that make sense to you guys? Is there anything I needed to cover again? But yeah, if you have any questions, our phone numbers are down on the bottom there of the screen. If you like this video, just make sure you like, share, and subscribe to our stuff, and share it with all your friends as well too, because it always helps spread everything out. Linda has a question here. What's your question?
I don't know if it's something you cover in this, but people need to remember when they are removing their fabric from the machine to pull it towards the back. Do you have a reason?
Yes. So pulling.
You heard me because
Yeah. So Linda asked why Grandma taught you when you pull your fabric out from your machine, why you always pull it to the back of the machine. So, and not to the side. And what she really is talking about is when you pull it straight back, because a lot of us have a cutter on the side of our machine, right? But what we see a lot of the time is people will pull fabric out the side or even out the front and then cut it off. What you really want to do is pull it out the back, get the slack on that thread, and then you can come around to the side to cut that. And the reason for that is because it keeps all your threads in the right positioning, especially your bobbin thread. Keeps your threads in the right position for when that needle takes that first stroke again the next time you go and sew. It keeps that bobbin thread in the right place for that to be able to pick up on that first stitch. Helps prevents a lot of rat nesting on the back there in those first couple stitches as well too. So that's why it's really important to pull that straight to the back. And some other machines too, and this is just kind of getting into the nitty gritty stuff of it more. Pretty much every single one of your machines, I haven't Yeah, pretty much all of them. You have another thread guide pretty much right here, right where your needle screw is. And on some brands of machines, like Brother and Baby Lock especially, some certain models of Pfaff and Viking, but mainly we see the issue on Baby Lock and Brother. Just the way that their last thread guide works. If you're pulling that thread, especially to the front, you're pulling that project to the front, you're going to completely bend and mangle that last thread guide. And we can always tell when that machine comes in here because that thread guide is all mangled. So always pull your fabric to the back, and that will help prevent all those issues that you have. So hopefully this video was informative to you guys. So if you have any questions, give us a call down at the bottom there. I'm happy to help you out or comment on this video and we'll get back to you. Other than that, that is all that I have for today. So thank you guys very, very much. And remember to come to our grand reopening on April 12th down in Carson City. Thank you guys, and you guys all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.